Ethan had been feeling tired for weeks. The city noise, busy work schedule, and constant pressure had worn him down. As a freelance graphic designer in Atlanta, he worked long hours on his computer, rarely taking a proper break. One Friday morning, while sipping his coffee, he finally decided that he needed time away from everything. A quiet place. No emails, no traffic. Just peace and nature. He opened his laptop and started searching for cabins in the North Georgia. Mountains. After a few clicks, he found a cozy wooden cabin that looked perfect. It was surrounded by trees, had a small porch, a barbecue grill, and even a hammock tied between two pine trees. The listing said it was peaceful, private, and had no WI feels exactly what Ethan wanted. Without thinking twice, he booked it for the weekend and packed his things by afternoon. He was driving through winding forest roads, the green hills rising around him. The air felt fresher already. Birds sang outside and sunlight filtered through the tall trees. After a couple of hours, Ethan finally reached the cabin. It looked just like the pictures, maybe even better. He stepped out of his car, stretched his arms, and took a deep breath. "This is it," he whispered. "A place to breathe, to rest." He popped open the trunk, pulled out his bag, and started walking toward the cabin door. Just as he was about to unlock it, he heard a voice from behind a wooden fence nearby. "Excuse me?" a woman called out sharply. Ethan turned around. There she was, mid-50s, short hair, sunglasses on her head, wearing a light sweater and holding a mug. She stared at him like he had just walked into her house without knocking. "Can I help you?" Ethan asked, politely slightly surprised. "Do you have permission to be here?" she asked. "This is a quiet neighborhood. No strangers are allowed. To just show up." Ethan blinked. He smiled softly and said, "Yes, ma'am. I booked this cabin for the weekend through mountainstays.com." The woman didn't smile back. "Are you sure? I've never seen anyone here before. You don't look like the usual guests." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Well, I'm not sure who the usual guests are, but I have the confirmation email." "Just here to relax?" She didn't respond. Instead, she narrowed her eyes and took a sip of her tea. "Well, I hope you don't plan on making noise. People come here for peace." "I completely agree," Ethan replied. "That's why I came. Here too." She turned around and walked back toward her porch without saying another word. Ethan shook his head and chuckled to himself. Maybe she was just overly protective. Or maybe she was used to troublemakers. Either way, he wasn't here to fight. He was here to rest. Later that evening, after settling into the cabin, Ethan decided to fire up the grill. He had brought some chicken, vegetables, and marshmallows. He turned on some light music from his portable speaker, just loud enough for himself to hear. He sat on the porch, watching the sunset turn the sky orange and gold. Then, once again, he noticed her. The woman Sandra, he'd later learn, was standing on her porch again. This time, arms crossed. She was watching him. Ethan nodded at her, politely, but she didn't nod back. She turned and went inside, shutting the door behind her. The moment felt strange, a bit uncomfortable, but again, he decided not to worry. Not everyone is friendly at first, he thought. Maybe she was just having a bad day. That night, after cleaning up and reading a book on the couch, Ethan turned off the lights and got ready for bed. He smiled as he lay down, thinking how nice it was to hear crickets instead of car horns. For the first time in months, he felt like he could sleep deeply. But around midnight, a loud knock at the front door made him sit up in bed. At first he thought he had imagined it. Then it came again, 3 sharp knocks. He quickly pulled on his shirt and jeans and went to the door. Through the small glass panel, he saw 2 sheriff's deputies standing on the porch, their flashing lights painted, the trees in red and blue behind them. Ethan opened the door slowly. "Good evening, officers. Is something wrong?" One of the deputies, a tall man with kind eyes, spoke first. "Evening, sir. We received a call from a neighbor. Said someone might be trespassing here." Ethan's eyebrows shot up. "Trespassing? I booked this place. I'm renting it for the weekend. You have any proof of that?" the other officer asked. "Absolutely," Ethan said, reaching for his phone. He pulled up the email confirmation, the receipt, and the ID he had used to book it. He even showed the lockbox code provided by the cabin rental agency. The deputies looked over the information. After a moment, the first one nodded. "Everything checks out. Looks like you're here legally." Ethan let out a small sigh of relief. "I hope I didn't do anything wrong." "No, sir. You've been completely cooperative," said the deputy. "To be honest, we've been here before for similar complaints from the same neighbor." "You mean the woman next door?" Ethan asked. The officer gave a small smile and nodded. "Let's just say she's very concerned about the neighborhood." Ethan nodded slowly. "Well, I understand people want to feel safe, but I'm really just here to enjoy the weekend." "We can see that," the second officer said. "Sorry for the trouble. If she causes you any problems, don't hesitate to call us." And walked back toward their patrol car. Ethan stood in the doorway for a moment, watching them leave. Then he shut the door and leaned against it, thinking about what just happened. He had never had the police called on him for simply staying at a cabin. The situation felt unreal, strange. But instead of getting angry, he decided to stay calm. There was no reason to let it ruin his weekend. He poured himself a glass of water, turned off the lights again, and climbed back into bed. He told himself not to think about Sandra. Maybe this would be the end of it. But as he closed his eyes, he had a strange feeling in his chest, quiet instinct telling him that this wasn't over. Not yet. The morning after the police visit, Ethan woke up feeling a little unsettled. He had come to the cabin to relax and disconnect, not to be questioned by officers or watched by suspicious neighbors. Still, he reminded himself that things were calm. Now, the police had seen his booking papers. They had apologized and even hinted that Sandra had done this kind of thing before. So maybe it was done. Maybe now she'd leave him alone. Ethan made himself a warm cup of coffee and stepped out onto the porch. The sun was rising slowly through the trees. Gentle breeze moved the leaves and birds chirped in the distance. It was beautiful, almost enough to make him forget what happened the night before. Almost, as he sipped his coffee, he noticed something unusual. A small piece of paper was tucked under the windshield wiper of his car. Curious, he walked over and pulled it out. The handwriting was neat but firm. It read, "I know you're not supposed to be here. You should leave before something happens." Ethan stared at the note for a moment. His heart beat a little faster. The words weren't direct threats, but they felt heavy. He looked around and saw no one, just tall trees and silence. He had a strong feeling Sandra had written it, but there was no name or proof. He went back inside the cabin and placed the note on the table. For a few minutes, he just sat there thinking. He didn't want to get into an argument. He didn't want to spend his weekend in stress. But this wasn't right either. He was a paying guest. He had every right to be here. That's when he made a decision. He wouldn't argue. He wouldn't yell. But he would protect himself. Ethan took out his phone and began documenting everything. Snapped a photo of the note with a time stamp. Then he walked around the cabin and took more pictures. His car parked properly, the quiet porch, the grill, the peaceful woods. Wanted to make sure he had proof in case things got worse. Then he did something simple but smart. He opened the voice memo app on his phone and pressed record. He placed the phone in his shirt pocket just in case there was another conversation or incident. He wasn't planning to provoke anything, but if she approached him again, he'd have it on record. He also made a quick call to the cabin rental company. A woman named Brenda picked up. She was kind and listened patiently as Ethan explained the situation. "That's Sandra," Brenda said with a sigh. "Not the first guest to call about her." "So this is a common problem?" Ethan asked. "Unfortunately, yes," Brenda replied. "She lives next to the cabin and watches everything. Yeah. She doesn't like people renting the place, but it's completely legal. You have the full right to be there. Don't worry, we'll note this in your file." "Thanks," Ethan said. "I just wanted to report it in case anything else happens." "You did the right thing," she assured him. "And please don't hesitate to call us again if she bothers you." After the call, Ethan decided to go for a walk, the forest trails. Behind the cabin were peaceful. He followed a winding path that led to a small creek. The water was clear and cool. He sat by the edge, skipping a few stones across the surface. It felt good to breathe, to think, to take in nature. For about an hour, he forgot all about Sandra, but when he returned to the cabin, he noticed something even stranger. Sandra's SUV was parked across the shared gravel path between her house and the cabin. It wasn't just parked, it was placed in a way that partially blocked Ethan's car from leaving. If he had to drive out quickly, he'd have a hard time turning around. Ethan stood still, looking at the vehicle. He didn't want to assume anything. Maybe it was an accident. Maybe she parked there and didn't realize. But deep down, it felt intentional, especially after the note from the morning. He took a deep breath and walked up the steps to the cabin. As he placed his hand on the doorknob, he heard it. "Don't think you're clever." He turned around. Sandra was standing in her yard again, arms crossed, same mug in hand. "I'm sorry," Ethan replied calmly. "You think calling the police last night makes you smart?" "I know people," she said. Ethan didn't answer, simply took out his phone from his pocket and pointed to it. "I'm recording, just so you're aware." Eyes narrowed. "I have no issue with you," Ethan continued gently. "But I do have a right to be here. I've done nothing wrong." "This neighborhood has rules," she said sharply. "I'm following all of them," Ethan replied. "If you believe I'm not, feel free to contact the rental company again." Sandra didn't respond. She turned around and walked back toward her house. Her dog barked once from inside. The door slammed shut. Ethan stood still for a moment. Then he looked down at his phone, stopped the recording, and saved it. He felt his heart pounding slightly, not from fear, but from frustration. It was becoming clear that Sandra didn't just dislike visitors. She was trying to make him leave. But why? He sat on the porch for a while, thinking about it. Was she just someone who hated change, or did she feel like she had to control everything around her? Later that afternoon, Ethan decided to write a short summary of everything that had happened so far. He typed it out in a document on his laptop, added the pictures of the note and her car, and stored the voice recording. He sent everything in, an email to Brenda at the rental company. That way, if anything happened later, there would already be a record. Evening came quietly. The sky turned gold, then blue, then a deep shade of purple. Despite everything, Ethan tried to enjoy it. He made a light dinner, read a few chapters of a book, then sat under the stars with a blanket around his shoulders. Still, something didn't sit right. The note, the blocked driveway, it's the way Sandra had spoken to him like he was the one. Doing something wrong? He knew one thing for sure. This wasn't going to be the end of it. The next morning, Ethan woke up early. The sun was shining brightly, and the fresh mountain air filled the cabin. He hoped today would be peaceful. He wanted to enjoy the last full day of his trip without any problems. After the events of the previous day, he was careful to stay calm and not start any trouble. He made a simple breakfast of eggs and toast, and sat on the porch sipping his coffee. For a few moments, the world felt quiet and kind. The trees swayed. Gently in the breeze, birds sang in the distance. Everything seemed right, but his peace didn't last long. Not far from the cabin, Ethan noticed movement. It was Sandra. She was pacing back and forth near the edge of her property, watching his cabin like a hawk. She held her phone, occasionally typing messages or making quick calls. Ethan wondered if she was telling someone about him. He decided to stay inside and keep an eye on things. He didn't want to confront her. Instead, he opened his laptop and started working on a design project. The computer helped distract him. But even with the music playing softly, he could hear Sandra's footsteps and the occasional sharp tone of her voice. Hours passed. Then, just after noon, Ethan heard a loud voice outside. "Hey, what are you doing here?" Ethan looked up and saw Sandra standing near the gravel driveway. Her arms were crossed and her expression was hard. Behind her, a few neighbors had gathered, watching the scene. Ethan stood up and walked outside calmly. "I'm here legally," he said. "I've rented this cabin for the weekend." "Legal or not, you're causing trouble," Sandra said loudly. "I'm not trying to cause trouble," Ethan replied quietly. "I'm just here to enjoy the weekend like everyone else." Sandra shook her head. "I don't believe you. People like you bring problems," Ethan felt his patience tested, but he stayed calm. He didn't want to make things worse. Instead, he reached into his pocket and took out his phone. "I'm recording this conversation, just so you know," he said evenly. Sandra's eyes flashed with anger. "You think that scares me?" "No," Ethan said softly. "It's just good to keep things clear." Suddenly, a woman stepped forward from the group of neighbors. She was middle-aged and wore a friendly smile. "Sandra, maybe you're overreacting," the woman said kindly. "He has a right to be here." Sandra looked at the woman but said nothing. The neighbors began to murmur quietly. Some nodded their heads in agreement. Ethan smiled slightly. He realized that not everyone in the area supported Sandra's behavior. That gave him some hope. After a few minutes, Sandra turned sharply and walked back toward her house. The neighbors slowly dispersed. Ethan returned to the porch and sat down, feeling a little tired but hopeful. Later that afternoon, Ethan heard a loud noise at the driveway. He looked outside and saw Sandra's SUV again, this time parked directly across the narrow path, blocking his car completely. Ethan sighed. He walked over to her yard, holding his phone ready. "Sandra, please move." "Your car," he said politely. "I need to leave tomorrow morning." Sandra appeared at her door, arms crossed again. "Not until you leave," she said firmly. Ethan stayed calm. "I plan to stay until my booking ends. Please don't make this harder than it needs to be." She didn't answer. Ethan took a step back and returned to the cabin. The blocked driveway was more than a small annoyance. It made Ethan think about what else she might do. Was this harassment? Just a neighbor being difficult? He wasn't sure. That evening, Ethan decided to call the local sheriff's department again to complain, but to ask for advice. The officer who answered listened carefully as Ethan explained the situation. "We understand." The officer said, "We know Sandra has made several complaints in the past, sometimes without cause. But blocking your driveway is serious." "Should I report it?" Ethan asked. "Yes," the officer replied. "Please report any incidents like this. It's important to have a record, and if she blocks your car again, we can come out and help." Ethan thanked the officer and ended the call, feeling reassured. At least the local police seemed fair and willing to help. After the call, Ethan thought about his next steps. He didn't want to start a fight, but he also didn't want to be trapped or treated unfairly. So, he decided to take one more step. Called Brenda at the rental company again and told her about the blocked driveway and Sandra's behavior. Brenda promised to send a company representative to the cabin. The very next day, to check on things, Ethan felt a little relief, knowing he wasn't alone. The rental company took his concerns seriously. The next morning, as Ethan was packing to go for a short walk, he saw a car pull up. A friendly-looking woman in her 40s stepped out. She introduced herself as Lisa, the rental company's representative. Lisa smiled warmly. "I'm here to make sure everything's okay." Ethan told her about Sandra's behavior, the police visits, the note on his car, and the blocked driveway. Lisa listened carefully, taking notes. "We've had complaints about Sandra before," Lisa said. "This isn't the first time she's caused problems with renters." Lisa pulled out her phone and made a quick call. After a few minutes, she told Ethan that the company would officially warn Sandra and remind her about respecting guests' rights. "That's good news," said, relieved. Lisa nodded. "And if anything else happens, we'll support you." Ethan smiled, feeling stronger. He was glad to have someone on his side. Just then, Lisa asked, "Would you like me to stay a bit and meet the neighbors?" Sometimes, talking to the community helps. Ethan agreed. Lisa and Ethan walked toward the nearby homes. Some neighbors greeted them warmly and shared their stories. One man said, "Sandra has always been a bit controlling. We like quiet, but she takes it too far." A woman added, "We're tired of the drama. Guests should feel welcome here." Ethan listened, realizing he wasn't alone. Many neighbors felt the same way. After an hour, Ethan and Lisa returned to the cabin. Lisa promised to keep in touch and offered to help if anything else happened. Ethan felt hopeful for the first time in days as the sun began to set. Ethan thought about the weekend ahead. He wanted to enjoy the beauty of the mountains, the peaceful forest, and the stars above. He sat on the porch, wrapped in a blanket, and looked up at the night sky. He took a deep breath and whispered to himself, "Tomorrow will be better." The next morning, Ethan woke with a quiet hope in his heart. After the visit from Lisa, the rental company's representative, he felt stronger, believed things might finally start to calm down. The neighbors he had met seemed kind, and it felt like some of them understood what he was going through. Maybe this trip wouldn't be ruined after all. Ethan dressed and stepped outside, breathing in the fresh mountain air. The sun was shining softly through the trees, and the birds seemed to sing just for him. He took his coffee and sat on the porch, watching the leaves flutter gently in the breeze. As he looked down the gravel path, he saw Sandra's SUV again, parked close to her house, but not blocking anything this time. For a moment, Ethan thought maybe she was starting to back off. Maybe the company's warning had made her think twice. But his peace was short-lived. Suddenly, Sandra appeared on the edge of her yard, holding a small bottle of something in her hand. She watched Ethan closely as he stood up and walked toward the edge of his porch. Her eyes were sharp, and her lips pressed into a thin line. Ethan smiled politely, but stayed cautious. He didn't want to give her any reason to complain or cause more trouble. Then, without a word, Sandra walked toward the gravel driveway and poured the liquid from the bottle onto the ground. Ethan's heart skipped a beat as he noticed the wet patch right near the boundary between their properties. "What are you doing?" Ethan asked calmly, but with concern. Sandra didn't answer. She just stared at him and then walked back inside her house. Ethan stepped down from the porch and looked at the wet spot on the ground. It smelled faintly like some kind of chemical or cleaner. He wasn't sure if it was harmful or just strange. But he had a feeling it was meant to annoy or scare him. Took a photo of the wet spot and saved it on his phone. Then he called Lisa. Again. When Lisa picked up, Ethan explained what happened. "She poured something on the ground by the driveway," he said. "I don't know if it's dangerous, but it feels like she's trying to intimidate me." Lisa listened carefully. "That's not acceptable," she said firmly. "I will notify the property manager right away. We'll make sure you're safe." Ethan felt a little better knowing the company was involved. He thanked Lisa and hung up. Later, Ethan decided to spend some time away from the cabin. He packed a small bag with water, snacks, and his camera, then set out on one of the hiking trails nearby. The forest was beautiful and peaceful, with tall trees casting cool shadows on the path. As he walked, Ethan tried to focus on the sounds of nature, the rustling leaves, the birds singing, and the gentle flow of a nearby stream. For a few hours, he felt relaxed. The tension from the past days seemed to melt away. When he returned to the cabin late afternoon, he found a letter slipped under the door. Curious, he picked it up and opened it carefully. The letter was from the rental company. It said, "Dear Ethan, we have spoken with Sandra and reminded her about the rules and the importance of respecting our guests. We want you to know that we take your safety seriously. If you experience any further problems, please contact us immediately. Thank you for your patience and cooperation." Ethan smiled, feeling grateful for the company's support. That evening, he cooked a simple dinner and sat on the porch, watching the sun set behind the hills. The sky turned bright orange and pink, then deep purple. It was one of the most beautiful sunsets he had ever seen. Just as he was about to head inside, he heard a soft knock on the cabin door. Surprised, he opened it slowly. Standing there was Lisa, the rental company's representative, holding a small tray with a cup of tea and some cookies. "I thought you might like a little company," she said warmly. "Sometimes it helps to talk." Ethan invited her in, and they sat together on the porch under the stars. They talked about many things: the mountains, the neighbors, and the challenges of peaceful living. Lisa shared stories of other guests and explained how the company tried to support renters. "I want to make sure your stay here is the best it can be," Lisa said sincerely. Ethan appreciated her kindness. For the first time in days, he felt truly safe and welcome. As the night grew late, Lisa said goodbye and promised to check in again the next day. Ethan closed the door, feeling comforted. He thought about how a little kindness and support could change everything. The next morning brought a surprise. Ethan was outside when a few neighbors approached, including the woman who had defended him earlier. "We want to apologize for the trouble Sandra caused," the woman said. "She can be difficult, but we don't want visitors to feel unwelcome." Ethan smiled. "Thank you. That means a lot." The neighbors invited Ethan to a small community cookout the next weekend. It was a chance to meet others and feel part of the community. Ethan accepted happily, feeling hopeful for new friendships. Back inside the cabin, Ethan reflected on the events of the past days. It had been a difficult journey, but he had learned a lot. Sometimes people act out of fear or loneliness. Sometimes standing firm and staying calm can change things. He felt ready to face whatever came next. Let me know when you are ready for part 5, and I will complete the story in the same style and length. Ethan woke up early on the last day of his cabin trip, feeling a mix of relief and hope. The past few days had been stressful, but with the support of the rental company and kind neighbors, he felt like the worst was behind him. He wanted to enjoy his final hours in the mountains and leave with good memories. After a simple breakfast, Ethan stepped outside and breathed deeply, soaking in the fresh air. The sun shone warmly, and the birds sang cheerfully. For once, the cabin felt peaceful and welcoming. He spent the morning taking photos of the forest, the creek, and the cabin itself, wanting to remember the beauty of the place despite the earlier troubles. As he prepared to pack, he noticed Sandra's SUV parked farther away from the driveway, no longer blocking his car. It seemed she had finally stepped back. Ethan hoped this was a sign of change, or at least the end of the conflict. Later that morning, Ethan received a call from Brenda at the rental company. She thanked him for his patience and told him the company had taken formal action against Sandra. They had sent her a clear warning about harassment and reminded her to respect all guests. Brenda also told Ethan that several neighbors had spoken up against Sandra's behavior during a recent community meeting. It felt like a small victory. Ethan felt grateful that the company and the community had his back. It gave him a new sense of confidence and peace. Before leaving, Ethan decided to walk down to the nearby creek one last time. The water sparkled under the sunlight, and the sound of the flowing stream was calming. He sat on a rock and thought about the past few days. He had faced unexpected challenges, but he had handled them with patience and calm. He realized that sometimes standing firm and showing kindness can change even the toughest situations. As he returned to the cabin, he found a note on the door. It was from some neighbors he had met, a simple message welcoming him to the community and inviting him back any time. The kind gesture warmed his heart. Packing his bags, Ethan felt ready to go home, but also eager to return someday. He was glad. He had not let the difficulties spoil his experience. Instead, he had turned a tough situation into a chance to connect and grow. Before driving away, Ethan took one last look at the cabin and the beautiful mountains beyond. He smiled, feeling proud of how he had stayed calm and strong. The mountains had given him more than just a getaway. They had given him lessons about patience, courage, and hope. As he drove down the winding road, Ethan knew that no matter where life took him, he could handle challenges with kindness and confidence. And sometimes calling someone's bluff with truth and calmness was the best way to win. If you want, I can help you create a full narrated story or script for this, or help with other parts. Just let me know.